Hello, welcome everybody to today's Beyond the Studio series. Thank you for joining us for professional communication and networking. This is the last in our 7-part series called Beyond the Studio. I'm Wendy Mueller. I work in training here at BRR, and I will be moderating today's presentation. For years, BRR has worked with colleges and universities to support the next crop of talent as they venture into the field of architecture and design. While the pandemic canceled some of our plans for office tours, mid-crits, portfolio reviews, etc., this webinar gives us another chance to connect with all of you and offer insights into the field. We're excited to have two fabulous professionals joining us today. Kirsten Hastings is a program manager for one of our largest retail grocery clients and brings a load of experience around building a trusted relationship with them and all of the members on a project team. J.R. McClelland is a designer working with our retail and grocery clients and will be sharing with us how he's learned the application of strong communication skills when working on design development and construction documents. Before I turn it over to our presenters, just a few administrative details to remind you of. If you have questions for our presenters today, please type them in the chat feature of your YouTube screen. I'll be monitoring them throughout the presentation, and we will be addressing the questions that you type up there at the end of today's discussion. As a reminder, we are recording this presentation and it will be available on the BRR channel on YouTube if you'd like to come back and review it. With that, I'd like to go ahead and get us started. Kirsten and JR, please take it away.
Good afternoon. We wanted to start this conversation out with why this is a Beyond the Studio topic. And you really are entering the profession in your next stage of education as you leave the mind. However, the learning doesn't stop. Architecture, like communication, is going to be a process that continues to change and evolve as you learn from different experiences. And knowing how to build both your professional knowledge as well as the skill of communication and networking is going to improve your entire career, from your capability to discuss projects with clients, your ability to discuss ideas with consultants and morph the design into something that works for vendors and works for your client, and then also to build up your social network of fellow architects. Just a little bit more about myself before we get into this topic. I've been with BRR about 6 years. I've been licensed for 2 of those. I have a total of 9 years in the profession in different capacities. I'm a member of this year's Kansas City AIA Pillars class, which is a leadership program here in the Kansas City area that focuses on how to be a local, strong, standing leader in our design profession, not just as architects, but as everybody from our ecosystem, MEP, lawyers, and interior design. All different kinds of professionals come together and learn what it takes to be a leader for our city. Along with that, I'm also a member of AIA, Women in Design, and USGBC. And I'm joined today with JR.
Hello, everyone. My name is J.R. McClelland. I'm 1.5 years here at BRR, and I'm about 2.5 years in the profession. Rather recent graduate, and I am part of this year's AIA 2020 ARE Success Team. So like many of you, I am pursuing licensure. And beginning that process during this time is, of course, very interesting, but I'm sure a lot of you are also experiencing that. I'm also a member of the Central States Committee as an associate representative for Missouri, and I'm also a member of AIA.
And that Kansas City Success Team really goes back to one of our other presentations that we did on how to get through the ARE. I did the success team and I loved it. How are you liking it, JR?
I love it. It's a great motivator. It's been a great tool that I've been able to dig deep into studying with tools and resources, and really a lot of networking has also been a part of that as well. So it comes in handy in all sorts of ways. So some quick housekeeping before we get started. Please be sure to register on Eventbrite. This is our last episode of this current series, but we will have, I'm sure, more opportunities in the future. And please stick around, submit your questions in the YouTube chat feature, and we'll get to those at the end. So what are we going to be talking about today? So why are we communicating? It's something that when you're in school, it's a lot different than when you're in the profession. So who are you going to be communicating to in school? It's your classmates, your professor, your critics, and that's quite a bit different when you go into the profession itself. And how you communicate to those people is different than the culture of communication that you experience in academia. And secondly, lastly, I'm sorry, why should people listen to you in the first place? What experiences do you bring that means that they should be listening to you on this particular subject matter? And how are we going to be doing that? What are the resources that you're going to be using to communicate to individuals or groups of people or to different companies and clients? And who are people that you can learn from? Architecture is a constantly growing profession. Your first stage of education is in academia, and your second stage is for the rest of your life. So who are you going to be learning those resources on building your communication skills from? And lastly, networking, which is a culmination of the two, really. It's going to be very important for you as you're going into the profession, as you're building up those communication skills, and subsequently, it's a constant development that you're going to find very useful for the rest of your career.
So, in beginning to talk about communication, let's talk about life in general. You are now making the leap from college to an architecture firm, and it is quite the leap. Looking back at my personal leap, I found myself 6 months out of school, standing in front of a city council meeting, arguing for them to pass major tax incentives for the company I found myself working for to build a new building, a new manufacturing plant there in that city. School did not prepare me for that. Life did not prepare me for that, but I made it through, and it was an educational experience, and it informed the kind of communication skills that I needed to work towards in my professional development. School did not set me up for that because most of the communication that we have in school is devoted around our personal projects. So you end up in a mid-crit or a discussion with your professor, and you're on the defensive. You're not in a collaborative conversation like you are once you get out into the professional environment. So both your skill set for architecture, your skill set for communication, your skill set for developing a confidence in your self and in your design abilities takes that leap from the school environment to the firm environment as you go forward.
So communication, what does that even mean? What are we even talking about when we're talking about communication, which is an interesting question. But communication is the means by which we're going to be enlightening people about what we're talking about where the project is going, about why you should even be doing the project to begin with sometimes, about the needs for the project, and also trying to find out by asking the right questions, how are you going to make that project better for the client? How are you going to meet the demands of the jurisdiction? How are you going to be able to make this project work with consultants that are going to help you facilitate this project and make it as good as it could possibly be? So who are we going to be communicating to? Now, Kirsten, I think that you have a really great question that you ask people when it comes to this.
Yeah, When I think about this, I really like to kind of address it head on and ask people who they are most frightened to talk to. When you look around your circle of individuals or the people that you need to speak with, who frightens you or gives you pause before you were to pick up the phone and call them? JR, did you experience that at all, that hesitation when you got out of school?
Very much. The first time that I made a call, I found myself almost whispering into the phone so that my fellow colleagues wouldn't hear me. I felt like I knew what I was doing, but then I thought, what if I don't? And that was the wrong approach. Really, your coworkers are there to help you and to facilitate your growth as an architect. But that instant reaction of, oh, I don't want people to, critique me on this call. So that whispering and, the first time around, you're going to be a little scared, but you're going to know a little bit more about what you're doing with the more experience that you're getting. And, we're going to be talking to different groups of people that we never talked to during school. Clients, consultants, jurisdictions, colleagues in the sense of the professional environment and other architects. It's a lot different than when you're talking to your fellow students, your professor, and your critic, because being on the defensive is the way that we sort of have gone through school, of defending the reason why we chose what we chose to our critic, and then also trying to develop that design to begin with the professor and the fellow classmates that you had. So with a client, it's very different, because you're trying to match the client's needs, not your needs. You're trying to show the client that, yes, this is what we're doing to be able to facilitate what you need. With consultants, it's a team collaborative effort. And I don't think a lot of collaboration happens as much in school as I think we might expect when going into the profession, because you're always collaborating with MEP, with structural, finding out how to make this project do what the client needs it to do. And then, kind of in a form of defensiveness is when you're talking to the jurisdiction, in which, kind of like how you were highlighting the purpose for that tax incentive, that the jurisdiction should let you do what you're doing, and being able to push that through to completion, because you do have to defend the choices that you've made, but defend how is this doing well for the client, how is this going to benefit the community that you're putting it in. And that's where that conversation with colleagues and leadership and other architects is so important, because it helps you become a better architect, and doesn't leave you whispering into a phone call.
You touched on a good point, JR, that I just want to elaborate on before we get back to kind of talking about who we communicate with, and that's the difference in the collaboration style that happens. So we do collaborate in school, like you said, but if you look at who we communicate with in school, it's other students who are your peers at your level. So in terms of this, yes, they would be like your colleagues and maybe your professor, but you're all approaching a studio project from a lot of the same viewership standpoint. Whereas when you're in the profession and you're communicating, you collaborate with everybody who's got a different stance, everybody who has a different stake in the project. So the client who financially is responsible for it and is the end recipient of it, or representing the end recipient. And then you have your MEP consultants that they need to, or your fire protection consultants or structural, that need to fit their pieces and parts into your overarching design. You're directing them, orchestrating the whole production to be a final product. But to get back to kind of who we may be most fearful or hesitant to talk to right out of school, JR, I think in my experience, a lot of people are afraid to talk to jurisdictions because, like you said, that is the professional defensive standpoint. And when you move into the profession, it becomes a confidence booster. Whereas in school, during a mid-crit, you you can wing an answer. You're given that license to do that. It's your design. You can say what you want about it. But in the profession, you need to have the answers. And it is really hard to get to a place where you can say, I don't know that right now, but let me get back to you, which is a trusted answer and an honest one. But also, along with talking to just jurisdictions, most people entering the profession today are fearful of picking up the phone and talking to them. So, be it whispering like you were talking about, or not wanting our colleagues to hear, I think that is the one type of communication that has really just changed. It may be our most historical form of communication, but my husband was telling me the other night that he thought of the phone as aggressive. We have a colleague that we're trying to communicate with who had not responded to several emails, and he didn't want to pick up the phone and call them because that was too aggressive. They too rushed to answer an email that they hadn't gotten back to. And I think the world has changed in how they view the phone call, but it's still a vital form of communication. Given our current environment, the instant message and the text message has really been pushed back into our meetings, as Zoom has kind of given us video conference capabilities. The one-on-one conversation has changed, whether we are able to be back in our offices or not. But the phone still remains this fear factor because you don't have the visual connection and you don't have the confidence necessarily on what you may or may not be asked on that phone call.
Right, and that one-on-one is something that we're so used to doing when we're in school, right? We're talking to our fellow classmates, we're talking to our professor, and then at the end we're talking to the critic in that defensive position that you were talking about. And right now especially, we have all these different tools and assets to be able to communicate what our needs are, what the client's needs are, what the project's needs are. So, being able to have that confidence to pick up the phone and being able to talk clearly and concisely is very important to the health of the project as it's moving along. And something that I think you and I have discussed is that we do love to draw. We as a profession, we like to draw, and oftentimes that stack of napkin sketches of trash paper that piles up, that can be very confusing to be able to clearly and concisely communicate what it is that you're needing to do for the project. So, drawings are a great asset. Drawings are a great tool, but being able to translate that information to an email, to a cell phone call, and not necessarily having to rely on instant messenger and one-on-one conversations, that can be very, very important to build those communication skills.
Yes, it definitely saved probably our favorite as architects for the last in the form of drawings. And I would say that the key to that is in terms of the bridge from school to professional environment is that it really is firm influenced. How you take that stack of paper you were talking about, JR, and get it onto a sheet so that it's still understandable is going to be influenced and hopefully mentored by the firm that you join. And sometimes it's even client dependent within a firm. You lay out a sheet different ways based on the details required and even the sheet size. And sometimes jurisdictions have requirements that fall in there as well. And I would say that's one thing that I really enjoy about BRR. From the phone to the drawing set, we really focus on mentoring individuals so that they can build that confidence platform to stand on in whatever type of communication and to whichever type of individual that we're asking them to talk to. So I would say in terms of all of our forms of communication, but focusing on drawings as the last one that we bring over, school changes because you don't only go from an environment where everyone around you can understand a 2D floor plan or an axonometric that you've spent hours detailing or drawing or making sure that the section references line up. You may all of a sudden be with a consultant that wants to run pipes and is not understanding why their pipe system isn't working with your structural grid, or your client who may not even understand what a cut plane is and what they're looking at when you put a floor plan in front of them. So the ability to change your communication style, JR, like you were talking about, how do you translate that drawing into a text message or an email or into a paragraph of words to market your idea becomes critical as you move forward in your professional life.
Exactly. And part of being able to adapt to the client style is to be able to focus on the client's needs. And, like you're saying, with being able to put all those different ideas that you had onto paper is really important to be able to show that this is what is working for the project. Sometimes our egos get pretty big. And especially coming from a school environment where the project was yours, you owned it. It was, you were given the assignment, but that project is your baby. That's yours. But in the profession, you're trying to do the best that you can for the client, and you're trying to use these communication skills to highlight this is what's working for the project and how to communicate with consultants that they're going to help you make the best possible project for the client. And setting aside our own egos is often necessary to be able to look at often that little project and make it the best possible quality, because all those little projects add up to being able to get more clients, being able to pursue different avenues within the profession, being able to explore new ways of making those projects work even better. Not everything is the great monumental masterpiece, but those little projects of great quality do so much for you in the profession and for building those skills and communication as you're going along.
They really do. Those little projects, like you were talking about, those are what add up to the long-term relationships that you maintain both with your clients and your consultants. And that all comes back to communication. You want to communicate and connect on a level that's going to allow you to not be just an acquaintance. You're not just a hired architect. Your end desire is really to be that trusted advisor. And if you can do that repeatedly, you'll end up with lifelong relationships inside and outside of a project basis. But that's what brings the clients back, and that's what keeps them. I know one of our longest standing clients at BRR, we do small, tiny projects for them all the way up to large, full-scale projects. And it's through years of history of doing anything and everything for them within reason and contracts that we've maintained that lifetime relationship with them in and outside of, as their project managers have changed and as our project managers have changed. Our firm and their company have developed a communication style together that's bonded that relationship.
And that can really be, when you're trying to communicate these things back and forth, egos and with the consultants, you often have to learn how to communicate to that one individual and what means of communication are going to work really well in that meeting. Sometimes, like whispering on the phone, you can become a little introverted. You can be a little afraid to assert yourself, but you do need to be able to assert yourself with confidence and say, look, I know what I'm doing, when you're talking about what you're talking about. But you also need to remember yourself and remember who you're talking to, because if you go in and you own the room and you're dominating the conversation, oftentimes a consultant with a really great idea is drowned out maybe by your voice or somebody else's voice. And sometimes when a client is trying to assert that, well, this isn't really what we're looking for, we need it to be a little like this, you need to be able to step back and say, okay, I want to make this as wonderfully of high quality as I possibly can for this project. And that's where that communication skill of being able to come with confidence, but being able to listen and to learn and collaborate, that becomes so important.
JR, that's a great example of being at the table both with the client and a consultant and just collaboratively discussing a project. And I think as you develop and realize you personally are either introverted or extroverted, and sometimes it's even job dependent or who's in the room dependent, definitely situational, how each individual that you're talking to, from teammate to consultant to client, each of them are going to be introverted and extroverted as well. And you're going to have to change how you communicate with them to arrive at the best destination for everyone. As you were saying, as an example, a client saying, well, this isn't really what we want. If what they want doesn't work for some reason, it's not that you should, the client is always right mentality, as if we were in a retail market. It's stepping up with confidence, but not overshadowing, of explaining why we're trying to give them what they want, but here's the reasons maybe the jurisdiction doesn't allow or the structure won't allow. And maybe that MEP comes in and provides that solution that you're talking about, or the structural, and together the best for the client is what's arrived at. I think as you learn to figure out how you communicate, you also need to learn to figure out how to communicate with other people.
Oh yeah, I mean, when you're talking to other people in the profession, sometimes it's very comfortable to talk to your fellow architects in the office. Sometimes it's very comfortable to talk to maybe your friends that are in the profession when you're in school. But being able to make contacts within the profession is so important in being able to grow your skills and be able to grow your opportunities in the profession. One way that I think, something that I think that everyone should do the moment that they graduate, is join AIA. AIA is fantastic, and you get to meet so many wonderful and interesting people, and you get to, build relationships with people that you would not have met necessarily in the office. It could be a consultant that you haven't worked with before. It could be, a fellow architect that you really admired the work that they did, or the lecture that they gave, and being able to communicate with them creates opportunities that you would be able to bring to another project. You're working on a project, something's not going right, you don't understand what it is, and then you remember, well, there was this one MEP that I talked to and they really knew their stuff. We need a consultant, and maybe this would be a great fit for that. And being able to have those one-on-one communications that you've built these skills up is really important. And oftentimes it's just fun. There's a great program that is all over many AIA chapters. I've been lucky enough to go and have the same event in New York. It's called Cocktails and Conversations. And it's really a blast, because oftentimes you get these great lecturers that come in, and other times it's just a group of architects, consultants, members of the profession, the extended breadth of the profession. That you get to just sip a drink, have a conversation, get to know people, and build those relationships that you can bring on to better and better projects as you're going in your career.
Sounds like a big deal to me.
It's a lot of fun, but it's also very important.
Yeah. And I definitely agree with joining the AIA right out of school, and Cocktails and Conversations is one example of, all of the different options they have available to help you in your network, but also just their conferences. And there are other conferences by other organizations, you know, Green Build with USGBC, Women in Design is working on possibly having a conference as well. But you end up meeting people that are going to build your network for the rest of your professional career. And I meet a lot of individuals that think that networking is that bridge that we first talked about from school to the profession. You know, you do it to get a job, or you do it to meet the right person, but really it extends so far beyond that. It builds up, like JR was talking about, all of the different possibilities, all of the different light bulb moments that you have of, oh, I met this person, or I saw this vendor. It allows you to be a connector between those individuals that you've met and your clients of the future. And also it allows you to just build on your architectural knowledge. The more people you talk to, the more experiences that you take in and you listen to is going to change how you go forward in your communication, how you go forward in your architectural style. But learning to build those, learning to communicate with people, interesting people over interesting beverages sometimes, is really one of the fun things that we get to go out and do with AIA. And I know if you're local in the Kansas City area, I really appreciate our chapter because they focus so much on not just getting architects in, but really getting all kinds of design professionals in, so that it really can be that collaboration environment, and where you can learn from each other and where you can make those lifelong relationships that are going to transpire beyond just your current location, your current job. But one key factor when you do that is remember those conversations, follow up with them, build on them. If you say you're going to do something, do it, and do it in a timely manner, so that you do build that trust from the offset. You know, remembering people's names, all of these things are cliches to communication that we're taught, but they really are vital to how people understand us and how we understand other people.
Exactly. And something that, you know, things to remember about communication is, like you were talking about, follow through with what you were talking about. Be sure that you're passing on that knowledge that you're getting. You know, I think that I've certainly been very fortunate in having great mentors, and hopefully passing that on will also assist other people coming into the profession. What is something that you know you would remember about communication, networking?
I think the one thing that really strikes me about communication is that it's a soft skill that we continually work on for the remainder of our careers, and definitely get better at the more you work on it. But it's not going to be something we list on our resume. You know, it's not something we focus on a job application necessarily, you know, right there as number one, I'm a good communicator. But maybe it should be. You know, in the 9 years that I've been in this profession so far, I've definitely seen projects won or lost based on communication skills. And so I think it's really important to remember that and to focus on it and grab opportunities to communicate better.
I totally agree. I mean, that's a really great point about, you know, that can make or break a project, because being able to communicate in a way that isn't acidic, but that is more fruitful, it helps the project along. It makes the project better than what it could have been before, otherwise, without that communication, and it builds to opportunities for more projects in the future. It's very, very important, and like you said, it's not necessarily something that's on the resume of fantastic communicator, but it's something that is absolutely integral to being able to grow and improve yourself and your contribution in the profession. So I think wrapped up here. If we have any questions, we're looking forward to those.
Yes, we do have a question. Is there a way to practice our verbal communication skills before we enter the professional world?
That's a good question. I certainly think that when you're, beginning to graduate and when you're working on your resume, working on interviews, uh, just remember to uh, how you've been communicating when you were in school, the things that worked on projects, the things that worked on professors, and oftentimes ask is the biggest thing in the world. I mean, have the confidence to go ahead and ask other people, how do you think this sounds? How do you think that how this could benefit us the most?
I think also while you're in school, there are opportunities beyond maybe just your internal school of architecture or design, depending on what university you're at. I know in my experience, there was actually a kind of recruitment dinner that the business school put on that you could go and you could practice your social skills in a dining setting, which is completely different, but it puts you out there and it puts you in a professional environment where you have to perform to some level. They're there for instruction, but you have to seek them out maybe beyond just your school of design. Also, there are a lot of mixers. I know they're more available to freshmen to begin with, but anytime you start your networking before you leave the environment, those skills are definitely foundational that you build upon. Just the comfort in which you carry yourself, your ability to hold a conversation, maybe on a subject that aren't that fond of. Maybe you don't like sports, but the ability to discuss last night's game, water cooler talk, anytime you engage in that kind of social activity before coming into the profession is building on that foundation that you'll work with in the future.
Great. Good answers, guys. I couldn't agree with you more. I'm not seeing any other questions. So at this point, I would just like to thank everyone for joining us for professional communication and networking. We hope you enjoyed today's presentation and learned something new. As a reminder, today was the 7th and final presentation in our webinar series, all of which have been recorded and can be found on the BRR YouTube channel. We invite you to review any that you've missed, and please share these with your friends and classmates. It has indeed been our pleasure to spend the last 8 weeks with you every Tuesday to give you an inside view of the real life workings of an architecture firm like BRR. Please be sure to follow BRR on social media and to keep aware of other events like this that we will be offering. We thank you again for joining us today, and please be safe and stay healthy.